नमस्कार. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome everyone to our 20th session on how to study the Bhagavad Gita. I think Nilesh is intrigued. He's overthinking about something. So we are going to talk today. Anyway, Nilesh, you can express during the session. Today we are going to talk about chapter 17, which is Shraddha Traya Vibhaga Yoga. So our last in so Nilesh, before we go to my questions, as usual, can you please summarize this session for us, this chapter for us?
Okay. Yeah, I will summarize and I'll tell you why I was intrigued. I wasn't intrigued about anything. I was thinking of something else. This is typical dilemma I have when I am invited to a program and I'm going to be the speaker or a keynote speaker or whatever it is, the chief guest. And then many places they ask me to sit on the podium until my turn comes. And that is a very intriguing time or a tough time for me, because I don't know what expression to give and what to actually do, just sitting idly there, So similar to that, there was some other subject. It was it was in the back of my mind and I was thinking about it. So let's get into our subject. So what is the summary of it? Again, we saw from the first chapter until 15th chapter, especially 13, 14, 15 was discussion of Jnana Yoga. And just like the essence of Bhagavad Gita has been covered in the second chapter, or then again in the 3, 4, 5, the fifth chapter as a Jivana Mukta, Karma Yoga versus Karma Sannyas. And again, it's like as if it's explained. Essentially, what is happening is you start with the second chapter and everything that's required, the Sankhya Yoga, the Buddhi Yoga, and then the Karma Yoga, the package is given, the Sthita Prajna, the outcome, everything is given. Now there are some additional questions that potentially people may have a confusion. And taking that into account, think of that as a Krishna, but also the Vyasadeva when he's composing Mahabharata some 18 plus years after the Mahabharata war, so 18 plus years after the Bhagavad Gita narration by Krishna to Arjun, when he is putting this together, he is also thinking of those questions and, basically giving the right words, in Anushtup Chanda to that dialogue between Krishna and Arjun. So now after 15, 16, as I said, is appendix. It's like appendix 1. And we can think of the 17 as appendix 2. Okay. And so essentially, that happens. Like if say you write a book and then you say, oh, I covered most of it, but there were a couple of points that actually needs additional explanation or something like this, and that were not covered in the main text for some specific reasons. Let me just cover it as a standalone in that context. So this is 16, but also 17 is elaboration of something that was possibly, or that is not possibly, that is covered previously in Bhagavad Gita. This is an expansion of it. So think of this as appendix 2.
Right. And actually you're right, because the 16th chapter, Krishna, it ends by Krishna saying that if you do not follow Shastra, then you will not get a good gati. So if you go outside the Shastra. So now in the 17th chapter, Arjun asks him that isn't Shraddha equally important? Is Shraddha also, can it also be divided into Sattva, Raja and Tama? So how much importance does Shraddha have? So what do you think? Can you elaborate on this question?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So definitely 17th chapter, although standalone appendix 2, I call it, or we can call it appendix B, A and B. So appendix 2 or B. Yes, it is a continuation from the 16th Adhyay, which is what I call appendix 1, which at the end he says, Ye Shastra Vidimustruja Vartate Kamakarata, right? So yes, it is a continuation of 16th chapter, but I would not spend time stating the specific shlok from the previous chapters that I want to just quote, but I will mention the 17th Adhyay, the whole discussion in 17th Adhyay as appendix 2. is also an explanation, just like I said, explanation for something that has been briefly discussed in what do you call the Rajavidya, Rajaguhya Yoga, the ninth chapter. So, for example, 9.25, but also what has been briefly discussed there in Shlok 23, 24, 25 in the ninth chapter. It's also, we can think of this as a expansion or additional explanation for something that is briefly discussed in the seventh chapter, the Satatya Yoga and whatnot, on Shlok 20, 21, 22, 23 in 7 chapters. So I'm just mentioning these specific numbers, Ashwini, so that those people who are listening to it, actually they can go back and refer to those Shlok as they come and study 17th chapter. So those are the, just from a very technical point of view. So yes, it is a continuation of 16th chapter, plus it's a elaboration of something that is briefly discussed in 7th chapter as well as 9th chapter. Now to specific question that you asked. So for example, the way Arjun is asking this question, think of it, how is that continuation? So there it is said, Ye Shastra Vidhi Mustruja Vartate Kamakarata Nasa Siddhi Navapnoti Na Sukham Na Paragatim, right? So if you don't follow the Shastra, you are not going to get Siddhi. That many people understand. If you don't follow the method to madness, if you don't understand how the car works and you're trying to fix it in an ad hoc manner, I mean, there is a 1 in a million chance that by luck you may be able to fix it, but that 1 million minus 1, the rest of the possibilities that you will not able to achieve the siddhi, not able to fix it. So that's na siddhi na vapnoti na sukham na paragatim. So that is all understood. So in that context, Arjun is asking, so what if a person's behavior like acharan is there, the sans shastra, removed from the proper method, like proper way of doing things. So acharan minus shastra. Acharan is done, removed of the shastra understanding. That is bad. Okay, I get that. Arjun is saying when he's asking that question at the beginning of 17th chapter. Yes, Shastra, what is this beginning of 17th chapter?
Bhavati Shraddha.
Huh?
Ye Shastra Vidhi
ये शास्त्र विधि मुस्तृज यजन्ते श्रद्धान्विता तेषाम निष्ठा तुका कृष्ण सत्तो माहो रजस्तम. Right. So he's saying acharan sans shraddha is bad. I get it. But what about if we look at somebody's acharan, it may not have the foundation of a shastra, but what if it has a foundation of a shraddha? Is this latter thing acceptable? Or does this have some utility? Because at least the person has a shraddha, okay? And the answer to that question, kind of, I mean, the whole 17th chapter is elaboration of that, but I want to add one more deeper aspect of it. So the natural answer would be what? Okay, so the behavior with sattvic shraddha. So Krishna is answering that behavior or acharan with a sattvic shraddha is somewhat acceptable. But because actually Krishna expands the answer, whereas Arjun is thinking shraddha as I mean, he's not thinking, he says that in the very first verse, so different types of shraddha. But he says, well, at least it's a shraddha. And so there is what Arjun is asking now, it's very interesting. So something that was how it was understood in a regular comprehension of the word, say 7,500 years ago at the time of Mahabharata war, is even the way it's understood today. Yes. We will say, oh, that person is not very intelligent, that person is not very logical, that person doesn't have a high level of discriminative intelligence, but he or she has a shraddha. And so when we say that, we use the word shraddha in a positive way. So that is exactly what Arjun is asking. And Krishna's answer is a behavior or acharan with sattvic shraddha is somewhat acceptable. But even then he will go on and explain that even the sattvic has its limitations. And this is not the first time he's explaining it. In fact, he has explained that in the past also. Quickly, I want to mention another point related to this. If we have not gone there yet, but if you go to 18th chapter, there is a discussion of a jnana, again as a sattva raja tama, or discussion of a karma as a sattva raja tama. even in the 18th chapter. And that is also true of a tyaga, that is also true of a buddhi, and so on. But I'm just taking jnana and a karma for a reason. So in 18th chapter, you can see that as an extension of appendix and then the final summary of the whole Bhagavad Gita as 18th chapter. But the jnana is described also as a sattva rajatama. Karma is also described as a sattva rajatama. However, if you go back to that 14th chapter, because see, that's where the whole discussion of sattva rajatama began, right? The three
Yeah.
Guna Vibhaga Yoga. So again, I'll just give the numbers for that, what I'm going to say. In 14th chapter, the jnana, and the reference verse is 14.6, is considered intrinsically sattvic. That's the tone of it. If somebody reads 14.6, and if somebody reads 14.7, there the tone is karma, directionally you can say, or intrinsically is considered rajas. So with that information in the background, now we can understand Arjuna's question even better. So in this context, Arjuna wants to know, can Shraddha be considered intrinsically sattvic? Just like jnana is considered intrinsically sattvic, karma is considered intrinsically rajas, although the jnana itself is separated afterwards in 18th chapter as sattva rajatama, karma is separated as sattva rajatama, and in this chapter, Shraddha is separated as sattva rajatama. But before Krishna answers that, Arjuna is kind of coming from that position, just like jnana was considered intrinsically sattvic, karma was considered intrinsically rajas. Can Shraddha be considered intrinsically sattvic? And that is where he is coming from. Now, Krishna, like every time, that's why we call Murares Tritiya Pantha. In some sense, you says Krishna never gives a straight answer. At least to a low intellect, it may appear like that. In reality, what Krishna is saying is, this is none of this, our life, or our comprehension of any deeper subject is never black and white. And so now he goes on a different tangent, you can say, in some ways. And then he says, well, hold on. Trivida bhavati shraddha dehinansa svabhavaja. Satviki rajasi cheva tamasi chetitam shrunu. The person is going to go based on whatever swabhav he has acquired from his prarabdha and then his activities in this life. It can change, but it may take time. And accordingly, he or she is going to prefer when it comes to any of it, like ahar, yajna, tapa, dana, or buddhi, and so on.
In fact, that was going to be my next question. He has in fact bifurcated yajna, ahar, that is food, yajna, tapa, and even dan into three types: sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. But even if I wanted you to elaborate, what does it exactly mean, or how with a practical example you differentiate, like if, for example, Tapa, he is bifurcated into Vangmaya and Kayik, Manasik, Sattvic, Rajas, Tamas, etc. I mean, he's given additional differentiation also. But before you answer this question, one observation is at the end of this chapter, in fact, when he's explaining what is Om Tat Sat, he goes to say that, in fact, without Shraddha, none of this is fructified. If there is no Shraddha, neither Sattvic, Yajna, Dana, Tapa, Karma, they all will become asat. So it's like, just as in a stone, when we do a pran pratishtha, it is that bhava or that shraddha that is so important to make, that he's trying to say that only, but I think towards the end of the chapter.
Correct. Yes. So Shraddha is important because, and actually, if you look at it, it has already occurred even before too, right? So, for example, Shraddhavan labate jnanam.
In faith lies cure. So, like the placebo effect,
And so because he has see, when he's saying, for example, wherever that third, fourth, fifth chapters, that area, Shraddhavan labate jnanam, there Krishna has not distinguished what kind of Shraddha.
No.
And in some sense, that is also the reason we may say, as far as thinking of Bhagavad Gita as a one text and a one time discussion between like Krishna and Arjuna, he's saying, okay, so Shraddhavan labate jnana, which means without Shraddha you cannot get the knowledge. Okay, then knowledge, jnana, I mean not knowledge, jnana is sattvic, intrinsically sattvic in nature. Does that mean the Shraddha is also intrinsically sattvic, right? Otherwise, why would you get a sattvic, I mean, why would you get a sattvic output, like namely jnana, from something that is not sattvic, like Shraddha? That is the tone. Now, when Krishna is answering in this 17th chapter, he's saying, okay, hold on. Trivida bhavati shraddha dahinansa svabhavaja satviki rajasi chaiva tamasi chetitam shrunu, which is to say, any act or any particular discipline is, we always need to divide it, broadly speaking, of course, into three categories: sattva, raja, tama. So that is a one type of classification. Okay. Now, when it comes to tapa, specifically, so now in this chapter we are discussing what? Yajna, tapa, and dana, right? Correct? As a three broad categories.
Ahar also.
Okay, ahar, yes, correct. And ahar is almost used as a yajna. You know, it's like vadani kavala geta, namagya sri harice, sahas havana hote, namageta pukaze, jivana kari jivitva, anna he purna brahma, udara bharna nohe, janize yajna karma. So ahar is used in the somewhat in the yajna. Of course, Krishna felt ahar as so important that he felt a reason to describe it separately. Okay, just even before going into the yajna, because that is a sharira shuddhi, and that brings me to that other aspect. I will not go into the yajna or the details of a tapa or details of a dana and so on. And I would encourage those who are listening to actually go and read these verses and the translation. They can see that what is sattva type of yajna, rajasa yajna, tamasa yajna. When it comes to tapa, the same thing. When it comes to dana, the same thing. That they can do. But one point I want to mention, especially with a tapa, because that doesn't immediately come into the yajna or dana, because that's a as such sattva raja tama takes care of it. When it comes to tapa, we have to first understand, and Krishna does that in 17th chapter. So he first describes, if I don't have the shlok numbers here exactly. Oh, actually I do. I would say 14, 15, 16 or something. He is describing the tapa of a sharira, tapa of a buddhi, and tapa of a mana. Okay, so this is amazing and beautiful. So this is like a tapa described in our body as mana, buddhi, sharir. Okay, so tapa of a sharir, tapa of a buddhi, tapa of a mana. And then he gets into the discussion of a tapa and separating it into three modes: sattva, raja, and tama.
And tapa, as I understand, is something very internal, whereas ahar, dana, yajna is something external acts. I mean, externally done, and tapa is done to internal for internal purposes, like to purify or to elevate oneself. Is my understanding? Is that correct?
That is directionally correct, because for tapa of a buddhi and tapa of a mana, by itself will not be known, right? It is going to be known through your actions, but tapa of a sharir will be known.
Yeah.
Right? Tapa of a sharir is visible.
Actions are through experiences. Tapa of a mana and a buddhi.
Correct. But see, when we will say, for example, a person doing tapascharya, okay? So that person doing tapascharya, let's say, I mean, I'm taking in a very crude way, let's say, he is going to do this, he is going to work 3 hours a day in the farm, and then going to clean the river for additional 3 hours, and say, suppose he adds a program like that, and that is a tapascharya. Tapa is a literally like a heat. You know, anything that increases heat. And now buddhi also and mana also, it increases heat. Like, you know, if you are thinking, that is a tapa, and then you get exhausted. I mean, you get tired. Yes. Or mana, like the tapa of a mana can create, I mean, if you are using your mind, that also creates heat, in the sense you may get exhausted, you may get tired. So the tapa is that way. But I'm saying buddhi and a mana may not be visible to outsider, but the sharir is a visible. Right? Now, dana, what happens is the action is visible, but whether it is a sattvic, rajasi, or tamasi, again, people can go and read the definition. It is internal. The outsiders may or may not know whether it is done in a sattva mode, rajasi mode, or tamasi mode. The same thing with the sharir, because sharira, mana, buddhi. That's why look at the I think verses 14, 15, 16. What is the tapa of a sharir? What is the tapa of a buddhi? What is the tapa of a mana? That distinction that is been done here for tapa is not done for dana or yajna. Correct. Okay. And now just one more point, and then I think that we should do it unless you want to go into Om Tat Sat. Now what happens is this. So tapa we are looking at. Okay. So sattva. So when the tapa is done in a sattvic mode, what is it driven by? It is driven by, or you can say the output of it is Shraddha. Okay, so somebody working in the farm, it may be driven by a certain Shraddha, working, cleaning the river. There is a Shraddha aspect behind it and so on. Or if it is done in a Rajasic aspect, by the Rajas, mode of Rajas, then it is driven by Dambha. I mean, if you look at Shlok 17, 18, and 19, that's where it is describing Tapa in a Sattva mode, Tapa in a Rajas mode, and Tapa in a Tama mode. And in the Tama mode, it is done by Duragra. So person is putting a lot of effort, like anything, which is like saying somebody says bad things to you. I mean, somebody says something that upsets you, and that in principle can upset you. How do you respond? Or what do you do? Not even respond. Do you react or do you respond? Okay, that's the difference. So the Tama is a Duragra. And the one point I want to mention that is very, very subtle point is that while Sattva is driven by Shraddha, the Tapa, we are still talking Tapa, Rajasa is driven by Damba, and Tama is driven by Duragra, or it may end up with these, let's say. The danger here is the Shraddha, which is supposedly the Sattvic mode of Tapa, and Duragra, which is a Tamasic mode. They actually can come very, very close. And the example I want to give is something that you and me discuss all the time offline, not in the context of Bhagavad Gita per se, but also Bhagavad Gita. Think of various moments. Think of various sampradaya. Think of various cults. Think of various religions. So when they see, so based on the teachings of that particular sampradaya, that particular moment, that particular Swami, whatever it is, that people, see, the people who are internal to that sampradaya, they have a lot of Shraddha about whatever is stated there in that religion or that guru for that sampradaya, whatever you want to say it. But and the other sampradaya you go, and the followers of that sampradaya may also feel very dedicated, great Shraddha.
Very fanatic, actually. Sometimes to the point of being fanatics.
So that Shraddha part is good, right? But so you do it, man. I mean, you like it, great, do it. But as soon as you say, well, in that sampradaya, they do this, 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 and you will suddenly see that person will laugh at it.
Yes.
Okay. So,
they will belittle you, and that is so sad. And then I sometimes feel, and then what is the difference between you and the Abrahamic religions? Because when I suppose I go to some sampradaya and say I'm a Devi Bhakta, they will tell me, oh, but that she's a demigod.
Yeah.
Somebody who's really understood Sata, somebody who's actually understood the way to Sat, at least not understood, maybe not experienced, but at least understood, read, and will never utter such a words, of such words. Because suppose I meet somebody who's a Shiva Bhakta and I'm a Devi Bhakta, never going to say, oh, the Devi is higher than, no. It is all are the same marga to the same truth, these are all ways and means to reach the same goal.
Right.
Just self-realization.
Correct. But my point, Ashwini, is even if suppose the person does not want to agree with you, that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens? Like you have found your path. I mean, he or she has found their path through that sampradaya. Maybe their guru has said it, or if you take a religion such as, say, Christianity and Islam. So a devout Christian saying, okay, well, the New Testament and the message of New Testament is the message for me to live my life. Yes. Okay, Jesus is my Aradhya Devata, right? And that's another discussion, by the way, here. The distinction between the Ishwar, versus Devatas. But fine. So that's the discussion you are referring to, which is okay. But we can give a benefit of doubt, or we can actually find a beauty that somebody is so dedicated to Jesus, for example. Fine. Now that same person will do that with a Shraddha, that even because Satvik also has a upper cap. Satvik also has this limitation, because Satvik can also lead to Ahankar that is given, right? So we will say, okay, but that's good. But now suddenly you say, okay, but now in Islam, they are looking at a book, Quran and Muhammad. He said, no. How can that be? Which means suddenly for the same thing that person can show Shraddha, in one place now shows duragraha in another place. Now to a devout Muslim, it will happen the exactly opposite way. And now we can pull that logic for different sampradaya. We see different gurus and their followers, So the Shraddha aspect is good. And that's why I wanted to say that the Shraddha and Duragraha can be so close that a person who is capable of showing a Shraddha for the tenets or for the practices of one Sampradaya, immediately, instantly, and I have seen that, and I'm sure you have seen that, like you have seen that, instantly shows a Duragraha for something that he or she is not considered, or he or she does not consider his or hers.
Correct.
Instantaneously, right? And so actually Bhagavad Gita, I mean, Krishna is giving a solution to that. Krishna actually says, so okay, so how, I mean, just be aware of it. And the one he words uses there is antaratma. So think of it, that is, I think, shlok 19. Now I don't want to quote the shlok, but so there the test to use as an individual, of course, the person who is that much cognizant can only use it. He's saying, okay, so I have a Shraddha here and I'm so happy following this. Now suddenly I hear a practice of somewhere else, I mean, different practice that I cannot immediately comprehend for simple reason that it's not mine. It doesn't belong to my sampradaya, or not told by my guru, whatever it is, or not part of my religion, in the sense of Abrahamic discussion. Now, suddenly, before even having that duragraha, totally a negative attitude towards it, the person should say where it is originating from. Is it, I mean, so does this bother me, or why it is bothering me? So it is a question to ask inside. So let him or her do whatever that person is doing.
Yes.
Okay. Because I mean, we can go into specific discussion, but something people, since people are aware, I will take two examples, and I don't know the names that they use. You can actually help me. So take in an Indian context these days. So there is one Art of Living by Sri Ravi Shankar.
Yes.
And Isha found by Sri Sadguru. Okay. Now, I am not aware of the either, in terms of like, what do they call some of the,
their philosophy or their kriyas or whatever.
No, Kriya. I was specific. Forget philosophy, that will be a broad subject, but Kriya, like Shambhavi Kriya versus Sudarshan Kriya. Okay. Like in Sadguru, I mean, Isha movement, there is an inner engineering. I don't know one Art of Living, but there may be some similar program, let's say. Now, as a person standing independent away from this, I have met people who are followers of these two streams, we can say, either the Art of Living or a Isha foundation. And I have found positive things happening to them in both cases. So my point is that sattva focusing on that tapa, like they doing their regular kriya given to them and japa or dhyana, whatever, great. But that is not a reason to have a hate or a inferior attitude towards the other sampradaya or other way of following. So that's what I'm saying. That is the danger.
So actually, you're right. Even sattva has its limitations, right? That is why Krishna keeps saying Triguna Vishaya Veda, rise even beyond the three gunas. That is the ultimate objective. Yeah, I mean, we both mentioned Om Tat Sat, and Krishna has beautifully explained. Somewhere just before our session, I was reading a speech by Dr. Vartak, and where he made a very interesting observation that the origin of Sat is Asat. From Asat has come the Sat, because Sat is something what we know, what we can see, what it is as is.
Yeah.
But how it arose is from something which is no longer there. We don't know what it was, and that was Asat.
Yeah.
That is very interesting,
Yes. Yes. And you can use that just because you said it. I mean, for this, you can use, and Naneshwari says that all the time, and there are very good metaphors for that. Is like the origin of Advaita is Advaita. Just like you said, Sat is, So the humorous example is let's just imagine how humorous it would sound. Okay. So for example, and I listened to this in one of the lectures from Warkari Sampradaya, in the Jnaneshwara Sampradaya. But I'll just quickly tell the story without giving the details. But it's like, suppose if you and me go someplace, like we are visiting places all the time. And what if So that, so asat and asat. So what Brahmarshi Vartakji is saying is, because the asat discussion, we have to talk of sat. Otherwise, actually, there is neither sat nor asat. Isn't that the point, right?
Yeah.
Because what is, and then, don't have to give a name to it, I mean, isn't that how it's supposed to be? Just like the children, if we say, oh, by the way, I remember, like, Arya is opening the door or something, and I would say, please, if somebody is there, say, don't say dad is home. And she says, why? Why I have to say that dad is not home, right?
Uttam vachami.
Ruttam vachmi, satyam vachmi. So something similar. Advaita Dvaita is like this. Suppose what if we go in some place and I'm introducing you to say whichever the place we go there. And what if I'm introducing, instead of saying, okay, meet my wife Ashwini, what if I say, meet my one wife Ashwini? Right? So how many do you have, right?
That can happen with you. And it has happened that you have forgotten my name also sometimes. So I will not be surprised.
Right, but how many you have? That is the question. So if there is a existence of a Dvaita as a concept, then you have to mention, oh, everything is one, and so on and so forth.
Correct.
Okay. Otherwise, you just say, that's my wife, right? I mean, it's something like that. The same thing with a sat, which is to say, we don't need to discuss it if everyone understands it, because there is a concept that people misunderstand, the lack of comprehension because of many things, lack of intellect, lack of logical reasoning, whatever be the reason. Therefore, we have to use the sat and asat, like what you refer to, Vartakji.
Absolutely. Actually, one more interesting in one thing I learned in that video is Satya ani Ruta. Ruta is that word is not available in any other language in the world. Our rishis have thought so deep of Ruta and Rutam that possibly no other language has thought of. So that is one just observation or something that I learned today.
What explanation he has given for Rutam?
Rutam is Satya is what is, right? But and Satya never changes.
Yeah.
Ruta is something which will change with time. For example, I was asking you, right, the gravity, the force of gravity, wherein he says that suppose I tell my weight is 105 pounds. Okay. You wait. Okay. And it comes to 105. You say, yes, she is talking Satya. That is Sat. But suppose I eat a meal, a heavy meal, and I weigh, then you wait, and it comes to 107. Am I lying? No. And yes, also, is it Satya? No. Is it false? No. But Rutam Vachanami, that is where Ruta comes in, because it is changing with circumstances.
It is a contextual truth.
Contextual truth, yes.
Yeah.
And that Ruta, that word is in Sanskrit and no other language.
Yeah. So, for example, I mean, maybe we can stop on that. Just like thinking right now, since it's very hot here. So, it says, somebody says, is Atlanta hot? Is the Atlanta weather hot? And we would say, well, right now, yes.
Right now, yes.
In general, also, yes, because it's not a cold place, like if you compare with something like Calgary, Canada, or something like this. But there are times in Atlanta when it is very, very cold, right? Yes. So, it's a contextual answer. All right. I am done. Back to you.
Let's end here. Okay. Dhanyavad. Jagdamba, Jagdamba, Jagdamba.